Bruh, y'all could just call me a sprinkle shaker because my jimmies are rustled. Bob the Neckbeard Part 7. Neckbeard creeps at the fitness center. Honestly, pretty topical. I've been seeing a lot of complaining about this on TikTok and whatnot. Hey, follow me on TikTok if you wanna. Thanks so much. Hello, everyone. From now on, I'll just copy and paste the cast list so I don't have to keep typing the thing out slightly differently every time. I don't really bother with reading it no more. If you would like to hear me read it, it's in the previous videos, that link in the description. So yeah, the cast: Nightlighten, ROP, Bob the Neckbeard, Rosa, OP's best friend, and it's time to continue. So, Rosa and I had decided to go swimming at the fitness center on a day that we didn't have school. As mentioned in part 3, a small wall that was next to the fitness center was a regular meeting spot for myself, Rosa, and Nate. Unfortunately, Bob discovered this after seeing Rosa and I sitting there one day, and he would just regularly pass that spot to see if we were possibly there. We also knew that Bob lived near that spot, just across the road from the fitness center. I guarantee you Bob's never stepped foot in that fitness center until today. uh, I was sat on the wall waiting for Rosa. My hands were freezing, so I had my hands buried deep into my hat, which I had taken off to use as a makeshift hand warmer. I assumed that it would be a quiet day, and that there was no one around, but I would later learn that a certain someone had seen me there. Guess who? Rosa arrived and we headed inside the fitness center. We paid, we changed into swimwear, two-piece, yada yada yada, and then we got into the pool. We did the usual, raced lengths, jumped off the diving board, etc, etc. All was going fine until about 45 minutes later when I caught something unsettling out of the corner of my eye. It was Bob. Bob, what are you doing here, Bob? Why are you creeping, Bob? And in swimsuits, no less. My God, just no shame whatsoever. Bob had settled himself down in the swimming viewing area with his tablet. The thing had a camera on it, but I highly doubt he'd be dumb enough to record or take pictures in a place like this. OP, you know better by now. He shooped you into some anime prod, okay? I'm not putting anything past this guy. The thought of Bob snapping our swimsuit pics for personal use made my skin crawl. Rosa, I loudly whispered. She turned around. I pulled her towards the side of the pool where we were able to be out of Bob's view. What? She asked, sounding annoyed as to why I had dragged her over here. Bob is here, I said. I could tell by the look on her face that she thought I was kidding. Wait, what? She said, laughing a little, and I shook my head at her. I'm not screwing around. Bob is here. Look at the viewing area, but don't let him see you, I said quietly, even though he wouldn't have heard us anyways. Rosa slowly popped her head above the side and saw Bob staring back, and suddenly lowered herself back down. Did he see you? Why is he here? When did he get here? She asked. I could tell she was sort of panicking at this point. One thing to note was that currently, Rosa had recently dyed her hair dark blue and black as opposed to her previous dark blonde, so from the back she looked like a different person. Is there anyone who we might have come with? I asked as we looked around the pool. It was quiet that day, so there were only a few old people also in the pool at that time, and they were already there when we had arrived. The truth is staring you right in the face, OP. I hate it, but we have to accept it so we can start to change it. Anyways, OP says, what the hell? He must have seen us come in and followed us. I looked at Rosa and she looked back. We both had the same idea. We had to get out of the pool without Bob noticing us and get out of the fitness center without him seeing us. After a few minutes, we formulated our plan. Rosa was to get out and head into the changing rooms, all the while keeping her back to Bob so that as far as he was concerned, he was just seeing a stranger walking around. Then I was to carry on swimming up and down at the side where I was not visible to Bob so that I wouldn't look suspicious. I would keep my eyes on the entrance to the changing room, where Rosa was watching Bob, and would signal when an opportunity where he was too invested in whatever was on his tablet opened up, allowing me to escape unseen. We pushed ahead with the plan, and it went flawlessly. Well, almost flawlessly. I hate to tell you, but even one flaw means, not flawless. We dried off and changed back into our clothes and headed for the changing room exit. In this fitness center, once you leave the changing room, there's a three-way split of small hallways, which all have ways to lead back to the lobby. The hallway dead in front goes straight into the lobby, while the right one heads towards the pool's viewing area, and the left one leads to the rest of the building. As we left the changing room, who do we see in the lobby waiting for us? Bob. He's just stood right there, looking directly at the door that we had just left from. Bro, this is so weird. I hate this game of cat and mouse. Can it just be over now? I ducked into the left corridor and hid around the corner, while Rosa did a 180 turn and walked right back into the changing room. So now I was alone, and no doubt that Bob was approaching and was going to suddenly appear from around the corner like something from a friggin' scary movie. Rosa was safe in the changing room, and I couldn't risk exposing myself behind the wall to go in there as well, or else Bob would definitely see me. I booked it down the hallway and made my way up the stairs. Oh, you split the group, it's not good. You should have had some contingency plans. Hey, if we have to split, meet me over here by the exercise machines. That's how I know I go to the gym all the time. Just refer to all of them as exercise machines. Anyways, I was on the top floor, in a room which was occasionally used for parties, which was luckily left unlocked. The room was big and empty, aside from a pool table and a few chairs stacked in the corner. I was exhausted, and I leaned against the pool table and texted Rosa to get her butt up here and to watch out for Bob. A couple of minutes later, Rosa arrived. She was panting like she had just run a marathon. I think he saw me, she said. Apparently, her convenient disguise wasn't enough to fool Bob. Did he follow you? I asked. I was seriously pretty shaken at the fact that he could find us, holed up in this dark, empty room. I think I lost him, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was coming up, Rosa said. Barely after she finished, I took off my hoodie and tossed it to her. I then reached into my bag and pulled out my hat that I'd been using as a hand warmer earlier. It was a little wet from the swimwear, but that was fine. Okay, put the hoodie on. Make sure to put the hood up. He won't recognize you easily with that on, I said. I tried to sound as confident as possible, but it wasn't working very well, because a lot of her hair hung out from the front of the hood. I put on my hat, pushing my hair into it and stuffing in as much as possible. I knew I would have insane hat hair afterwards, but I didn't care. Yeah, escape is what we're focusing on right now. Fashion takes a back seat. So we peered out the door, and then we made a break for the stairs. I felt like I was in some kind of stealth game. We looked down the space in the center of the stairs, and we saw Bob coming up. Crap, 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 up, go on, I said to Rosa as we quickly turned around and headed to the elevator for the disabled on the next floor up. We traveled back to the ground floor via that elevator and made it out the door. I had to feign a limp so the staff wouldn't have a go at us for using the disabled lift. Needless to say, we got away from the fitness center as fast as we could and went straight home. It was a crazy day, that's for sure. But you didn't even have a brush with the neckbeard. This was a successful mission. I'm so proud of you, OP. Honestly, I never thought that it would work. Obviously, stealthing around probably isn't the way to get Bob to actually leave you alone. You need to sit him down, have a frank heart-to-heart, but I guess until you're ready for that, the stealthing works fine-ish. You're probably better at it than me. I'm 6 feet tall, I ain't stealthing nowhere. But let's see what happens over there in part 8, which we will get into right now. Bob the Neckbeard, part 8. School trip buddies! Bus trip! Oh boy. Probably a less intense story than the one before, but I thought I'd tell it anyways. Cast, OP, Bob, Lyra, oh, that's a new one. Good friend of OP's, the kind that you meet in a lesson via a group project and realize she's actually pretty awesome. Had a few similar interests, and we had each other's backs. There's also Nate, of course. I guess Rosa doesn't get a part in this story, but we do get Mr. Moss and Mr. Sir returning. So hey, that's neat, and now it's time for the story. It was during form, and Mr. Sir had given us some letters about an upcoming trip to London for our year group. Rosa was in the year below me, so she wouldn't be going. We were going to visit a few museums and art galleries. I read the letter and saw the trip spanned over 2 days, with a night in a hotel as a place to stay overnight. Pretty cool, I thought. Form was over, and I was doing the usual, reading a book before people started arriving to the lesson. It was then that I heard loud footsteps and the crash of the door banging against the wall, and I knew that Bob had arrived. This was usually the sign that I was not gonna get any more reading done. He flopped down on the seat next to me while I had my cheek resting on my hand in an attempt to channel him out. Of course, that didn't deter him at all. "LP, did you hear about the trip? It sounds so cool," he said. This was probably the most excited I'd ever heard him about anything. "Yeah, it does," I replied, sounding as uninterested as possible. For the record, I of course did like the sound of the trip, but I was purposely sounding uninterested to throw Bob off. "I think I already found my travel buddy," Bob said. I assumed that it was one of his friends that he constantly wanted me to meet. "Oh? Who is that?" I asked. I was genuinely curious at this point. "You, of course." Ugh. "We can talk about anime and games on the way. We get to share a room. We get to go around London together," he said, as if that was meant to drop my undies right then and there. Ew, dude. I don't think the school administration is gonna allow mixed gender rooms. And even if they did, here goes Bob being super presumptuous again. I'm not your travel buddy. You don't just sit down and say things and then they happen. How about you ask? Ask like a normal human being. Thank you. OP says, "Yeah, thanks, but no thanks. I've already made plans with other people," I said, trying to tear away at his fantasy. "Oh," Bob said, defeated. "Who with?" He sounded like he was questioning me as to who these beard blockers were. Nate for the bus trip and traveling around London, Lyra for the hotel," I said. Had Rosa been on the trip, we would have shared a room and traveled around together, which would have driven Bob nuts. 2 of his ladies sleeping together in a room and having pillow fights? In reality, we probably just would have played Pokemon and stuffed our mouths with snacks. You mean chicks at sleepovers don't wear lingerie and have pillow fights? Man, I'm disappointed. But why can't we share a room?" Bob asked. I gave him the "not if you were the last guy on Earth" look. "Because it's already arranged with Lyra." "Sorry," I said. There was no way that I would sleep and shower within any sort of close proximity to Bob. Well advised. For the few days that led up to the trip, I'd get constant Facebook messages from Bob asking me to reconsider sharing with Lyra and traveling with Nate. Of course, I ignored these messages, and soon the day of the trip came. I was awake bright and early, which meant I was able to get ready and set off earlier than I had planned. Fortunately, the bus was already there and was allowing students to get on board. I got on to fortunately find that Bob hadn't arrived yet, and there were only about 4 or 5 students who had arrived so far, so I took a seat, making sure to save one next to me for Nate. I don't know if that's a bright idea. Bob's gonna show up instead of Nate, isn't he? I spent the next few minutes looking out the window. Down the path, I see a figure with long blonde hair. I could tell that that was Nate from far away, but behind him, I saw a larger, bumbling figure bouncing his way down the path. That was definitely Bob. Bob must have spotted Nate and planned to overtake him to take the bus seat next to Milady. as he appeared to now be power walking up the path. I had to hold back my laughter as I saw this human blob moving as fast as he could, but still unable to catch up to Nate. Oh, come on, Bob, you gotta use your natural spherical shape. Nate and Bob finally reached the bus door at about the same time, and I could see Nate approach the door to board, but Bob barged him out of the way and boarded first. I peeped my head down the middle of the bus and saw Bob barreling straight towards me. Oh no. Hello, OP, he said as he stood next to me, moving towards me to try and get me to move across so he could sit down next to me. Hi, Bob, I said as I refused to budge. Could you shuffle across, please? I would like to sit down, he said, sounding incredibly full of himself. Sorry, seat taken, I said, as I pointed to Nate, who was standing behind Bob, waiting to get him out of the way. There you go, line in the sand. Pull the old Forrest Gump.
Flight's taken.
Bob says at this point, oh, I see how it is. Yeah, but do you though? And instead of taking the hint that I didn't want to spend a good few hours next to him, he sat down directly behind me. Not surprisingly, no one sat down in the seat next to him. Oh, there truly is just no escape. What the hell's this problem? Nate asked me. I shrugged, not knowing nor wanting to know how the mind of a neckbeard works. For the first bit of the coach trip, I talked to Nate about the usual stuff, video games, anime, etc., all the while being interrupted by Bob, who insisted on correcting or throwing in his 2 cents on whatever we were talking about. So yeah, basically eavesdropping. Not long into the trip, Nate had fallen asleep, as he hadn't gotten a good night's sleep the night before. Soon enough, I'd fallen asleep as well, my head falling and leaning against Nate's. And then I was awoken by a strange feeling. At this point, I should remind you that Nate has fairly long hair, in a similar but slightly lighter color than mine. I could feel something on part of the back of my head. Nate felt something too, as he had grouchily woken up as well. I turned around and let out a scared little noise. Bob was right there, right up near the gap between the seats, with his hand on my hair. Bob! I shouted at him, and Nate also turned around. If glares could kill, the one that Nate gave Bob would have caused him to drop dead. Bob had been accidentally caressing Nate's hair as well. You know there's a shrine to you in the closet, right? There's a little hair doll that's made up of half Nate's hair and half OP's hair. He comes and brings the hair doll offerings of Hot Pockets and chicken tendies. What the hell? Nate said as he shoved his hand through the gap to push Bob away. I didn't do it on purpose, he said. Yeah, because stroking someone's hair while they sleep and having your face right next to it is something that is so easily accidental. Sure, touch my hair again, and it'll be the last thing you ever do, Nate said to Bob. I knew Nate was grouchy when he woke up, but I never thought he'd be this upset. For the rest of the bus journey, Bob refrained from touching either of our hair and kept his mouth shut. Unfortunately, this would soon pass by the time we arrived in London, but this post is getting pretty long and there's still a lot to tell, so I'll split this story into 2 parts. Stay tuned! Bob really is an entitled human being with delusions of grandeur, isn't he? Probably the most stereotypical neckbeard case that we've seen. And he's been so, needlessly creepy this entire time. Even if OP, by some miracle, did like Bob at one point, you really think that's gonna hold up through, sniffing her hair while she sleeps? It's so creepy, dude. Why do you do these things, Bob? I'd like to say it seems like he can't help himself, but I know he can. He chooses not to. He ignores every single sign and wonders why things don't turn out different. It's just so frustrating. I suppose we'll get into the second half of this story and see how it devolves just a little bit further, and that'll probably be the last one for this episode. So let's get over there. Bob the Neckbeard, Part 8, School Trip Buddies in London, Part 2 of 2. Part 1 of this story's over there, we just read it. I'd recommend you read that one if you haven't already before reading this one. Okay, check. Cast, OP, Bob, Lyra, Nate, you know them. There's also Mr. Moss, Mr. Sir, and Ethan, who's a pretty cool dude, one of Nate's early childhood friends. The adventure now continues! Right after a brief plug where I say, hey, if you watched the episode this far, you probably enjoyed it. I'd appreciate if you subscribe, come back, visit us again. Thanks so much. So, we arrived in London and headed towards the nearest tube station. We were all given tube tickets to be able to get around, as a group, of course. I stuck with Nate, as planned, and I didn't hear a thing from Bob for a good hour or two while we were in the museums. I thought this was great. No Bob for a while, but then out of the blue, Bob approached me. I brought you a gift, he said. I was pretty wary at first, half expecting him to whip out an adult toy or something for me. Oh, what is it? I asked. To my surprise, it was actually a pretty normal gift. A miniature Big Ben on a keyring. He handed it to me and I lifted it up with my index finger. Oh, thanks, Bob. That's actually really nice of you, I said. And while I did appreciate the gift, perhaps I shouldn't have sounded too enthusiastic about it, because that would only add fuel to the fire raging in this neckbeard's heart. Bob smiled victoriously and rejoined his traveling buddies. I mean, it's almost a nice gift, but it comes with loads of strings attached. It's just a keyring. I think I'm good without it. Thanks, but no thanks. It's all gonna come back around, I can guarantee you that much. Anyways, when we were looking in the first art gallery, Bob seemed to be hovering around Nate and I an awful lot. I didn't want to say anything in case it was just a coincidence, plus it was an art gallery and I'd rather focus on the art than some neckbeard who may or may not be hanging around me. He's definitely hanging around you. You're sort of in denial here. I don't understand how we're still in denial. But yeah, also, it's a class trip. I don't really see what other options you have than to sort of just tolerate it for now. Oh, it's frustrating. In the next gallery, I quietly whispered to Bob, Bob, where are your friends? I thought you were hanging around with them. I was expecting him to reply in a similarly quiet voice, but of course Bob wouldn't know anything about being courteous in an art gallery. I already am. My group's over there, Bob said, not bothering to lower his voice at all. Why do you inquire? He asked, again, far too loud. Just wondering is all, I said quietly. I looked at Nate, who shook his head at Bob's abject stupidity. It was like this for the majority of the time in the art galleries, Nate and I entering a different section of the gallery, and then Bob following us and dragging all of his friends along in the process, so that he could be near me, and it was just weird. I'll be real with you, OP, it's been weird for a really long time. This is actually one of the least weird things that Bob has done, comparatively. It was also especially weird when we were on the tube. I would always try to sit with the ends of the seats on one side and Nate on the other. Bob would almost always try and sit next to, across, or even just stand up next to me, even if it meant ditching his friends when they found a place which had adequate space for all of them, including Bob. And of course, it wasn't doing Bob any favors that both me and Nate had earbuds in while on the tube, so most short journeys on there would just be the two of us in our own little worlds, while Bob stood there, staring me down. It was the end of the day, finally, which meant we were arriving at the hotel. I met up with Lyra, and we headed up to our room. Nate was sharing a room with Ethan, a buddy of his, and that room was a little ways down the hall from Lyra and myself. But Bob also was unfortunately only a few doors down from us, which meant he knew which room I was in. It's okay, it's a hotel. They got those big old locks on the door. Just don't disengage the lock ever, ever. I'm sealing myself in here for 12 hours. Don't ask if I'm okay. So me and Lyra entered our room. It was nothing spectacular. Just 2 beds, a little bathroom, a sofa, and an old TV. We watched TV for a little while, but unfortunately hit a dead end where there was nothing left to watch on the limited channels that we had. Bro, they really cheaping out on this hotel, right? Come on! I'm trying to watch some Nat Geo. You have to pay for the channel. Around this time, there was a knock on our door. Oh, great. I wonder who that could be. Me, being the oldest out of the 2 of us, opened the door slightly. Unsurprisingly, I was staring at the unwashed, barely covered gut of the NECKBEARD Bob. Don't they got like a little peephole on the door? You should have scoped it out before you just opened it. Hello, OP. Mind if I pop in for a moment? He said, almost as if he were asking a question. I say this because he pretty much barged the door open with his big flabby arms in order to gain access to the room. I mean, I guess this is some sort of progress. Usually he'd just be like, it's time for us to hang out. Definitive statement. At least he's taken to asking questions now, even if he doesn't wait for the response. Okay, yeah, sure, I guess, I said, seeing as Bob was basically already in the room by the time I had any sort of moment to react. Bob looked at Lyra and gave a short nod of acknowledgement. Hello there, ma'am. God. You're Lyra, correct? He asked. I have no idea why he felt the need to call her ma'am. It's just the way he chose to talk. Yeah, that's me, Lyra said softly. I could sense something was amiss with her, but I played it off as just, you know, Bob's sheer presence. So Bob rambled on for a few minutes about stuff that I really didn't care about, so I was pretty zoned out. I realized that I could visit Nate and Ethan's room for a few minutes. Seeing as Bob had now invaded our room, I didn't see a problem with going to theirs for 5 minutes or so. No, OP, what are you doing? You never give up the homestead. Call Nate and Ethan and have them come over to your room. It's time for reinforcements. We make our stand here. We must drive him back. But OP instead says, I'm gonna go see Nate and Ethan for a few. I'll be back in a minute. I did feel kind of bad for Lyra, as it was a pretty crap move to just leave her alone with Bob. I mean, at least you acknowledge it, dude. Definitely not the move to make, like I said. I quietly asked her to keep an eye on Bob while I was gone, and I left the room and chatted for a bit with Nate and Ethan, who were deep into an intense Pokemon battle. Hey, let me know who your favorite Pokemons is in the comments. My first and second favorites are Cubone and Kangaskhan, respectively, because they're sort of related maybe in that deep Gen 1 lore. Anyways, when OP finally heads back to her room, I noticed that the door was open. That was weird, I thought. I was sure I had shut the door behind me when I left. I entered the room and Lyra wasn't on her bed. Bob was also absent. Bro, y'all just got robbed in like the 5 minutes? Lyra, I called throughout the room. In here, I heard a weak voice say from the bathroom. It was Lyra, and I had a feeling that I knew what had happened. Oh my god, did this just take like one of the darkest turns ever? Why did you leave her alone, OP? What's wrong with you? But OP asks, are you okay? Before entering. No, could you get me some water from the sink? Lyra weakly asked. I entered, and what I saw was not a pretty sight. Might want to skip this bit if you're eating. Lyra was hunched over the toilet bowl with vom in and around the toilet and on her shirt and in her hair. Whew, and it was at this point we all let out a collective sigh of relief. I thought it was gonna be really bad. I thought it was gonna go a Wheezy Beard Casino Beard type of way. A little bit of regurgitation, I guess we can handle that. Jesus, dude. I was really upset for a minute there. Lyra, what happened? I asked her. I was pretty concerned, as you would expect. At first, I thought this was something that Bob had done. I think I ate something bad. I ran in and threw up everywhere while Bob was talking, Lyra said. Did Bob say or do anything? I asked. Surely he'd have the common knowledge to ask if she was okay or if she needed anything. No, I think he just left, she said. Bob is not human, dude. He is the same alien species as Sir Sam. I'm like 100% sure of it. And of course, OP was pretty upset at that, just leaving someone who obviously wasn't well on their own. For God's sake, Bob. Well, is there anything that you need, Lyra? I asked her. No thanks, I think I'm okay at the moment, she said. And after that reassurance that she was okay, I went to my bed. But I looked at my bag. Some of my clothes, which I don't remember taking out, were in a heap on my bed. Oh my God. Oh my God, he stole the undergarments. This was all a ruse raid for underoos. I didn't know whether I'd just taken these out and forgotten, or if something else had happened. Something else referring to a certain gelatinous blob in this case. I sifted through what was there. 2 t-shirts, the socks I'd been wearing that day, which I'd taken off because it was a pretty warm room, and a bra. Oh dear. I scratched this up to me being forgetful rather than a creepy guy looking through my clothes. Oh, so everything's there? That's the checklist? I guess that's good. But I still think it was Bob. He's been escalating this entire time. He might not have taken anything, but he definitely sniffed it. The rest of the night went pretty normal, thank God. We showered, I took care of Lyra while she wasn't feeling well, at the advice of Mr. Moss, who I quickly informed about Lyra's condition. The next morning, I asked Lyra how she was feeling. She felt better after getting whatever it was she had eaten out of her system. Lyra got dressed, and then so did I, but I couldn't find a fresh pair of socks. I'm sure that I had packed some. Oh, something went missing. Bob found a new coom sock, I'll tell you that much. Oopsie. Then I thought, what if Bob did go into my stuff and stole some of my socks? Oh well, OP says, I guess I gotta make do with wearing the socks that I had worn the day before. And I also had a quiet word with Mr. Moss about the missing socks incident.
So you think this boy has your socks?
He asked to confirm. I could tell he was baffled by the situation. Yeah, I was almost sure that I packed some, but I couldn't find any this morning, and Bob was the only one that came to our room, I replied.
Right, well, I'll have a talk with him when I see him, okay?
He said. I thanked Mr. Moss for the help, but I was pretty sure that he, even being as great a teacher as he is, wouldn't really be able to do anything, as I doubt a teacher would be allowed to raid a student's belongings based on some other student's vague claim. And then on top of that, those socks are going to be unrecognizable within the next 24 hours. You don't want them back, OP. Trust me.
Trust me on this.
Later on that day, Mr. Moss told me that he had talked to Bob, who vehemently denied doing anything of that sort. And that was basically as much as he was allowed to do. I thanked Mr. Moss for the help and kept my eye on Bob for the rest of the day. After the talk with Mr. Moss, I noticed that Bob seemed to distance himself from Lyra and I, and also from Nate and Ethan, who were also hanging out with us during the rest of the trip. The ride home was uneventful. The 4 of us sat together just chatting away, while Bob looked at us, probably only Nate actually, with contempt. And that's the end of this rather long story. Next time Bob tries to art and belittles some who tried to do the same, even if those people actually do it better than he does. Yeah, kind of like that art beard college guy. Remember? That's like a really old saga on the channel. But yes, that episode taught me very early on that neckbeards, they just can't handle somebody being better at something than they are. Their egos are just so overinflated that even the tiniest little poke, it's gonna go up. Just a massive explosion. And I hope to see that. We got 2 more parts of Bob the Neckbeard. Next episode might be a relatively short one. I'm not too sure. I might have to find another little one-off to stuff in there as a bonus. Maybe a song. I don't know. I'll roll it around in the old noodle. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, though. I hope that you like, comment, subscribe, do all them things, you know? Follow me on the social medias, you know? Lots of links in the description, you know? Did I say you know enough? Do you know now? I'm sure you do. The people who especially know are my Patreon patrons, my gorgeous, wonderful, beautiful, generous channel members. You can click the join button just under this video if you'd like to join them. There's lots of rewards for you. And I hope that you'll all come back, join me tomorrow. Always remember, friends, wash your hands, keep yourself safe out there. You are loved. You are worthy. You definitely deserve it. And I shall see you in the next one. So until then, bye-bye.